The final take for me, my summary on what we discussed is, images and videos are great. Keep them short, keep them elegant, make sure that you don't force it though. Be a minimalist as you approach not just video and images, but also other modalities for learning and development. And when you do that, you keep your mutant learner in mind and they will appreciate you for it.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching or listening from. My name is Matt Pierce. I'm the host of the Visual Lounge, and where we talk about using video and images in the workplace. Particularly, we're going to be talking about learning today. We're going to be talking about learning strategies and how your organization might be able to benefit from having some more strategy around the learning. And whether you're a professional, like learning and development creator, trainer, whatever it might be, or you've just been tasked with the role, I'm sure there's going to be something great for you today. So with that said, let's jump in and introduce our guest. Treion Muller is a South African American with a made-up French name who once managed an Italian restaurant. He has spent the past 2 decades helping some of the largest learning and development companies in the world with their behavior change and digital transformation initiatives. Some of his roles have included CEO and founder, Chief Strategy Architect, Chief Product Officer, Chief E-Learning Architect, and Treion is also a go-to expert, author, and problem solver who knows what learners want, how they want it, and what to do about it. Treion has a master's degree in instructional technology and learning science and is currently a PhD student in the same field. He is the author of several books and publications, including a new book coming soon, The Rise of the Mutant Learner. With that said, help me welcome to our Visual Lounge, Treion Muller.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here.
Treion, it is a pleasure to have you here. We met just a couple months ago, and it was just like I felt like this kind of instant connection, getting to know you over a cup of Sprite, I believe it was.
It was down in Texas.
That's right. Now we're going to clear something up for everybody. You're South African American, which is we don't hear that, so that's the accent we're hearing, I'm assuming.
Correct. I was born and raised in South Africa, but I am now an American citizen.
Well, we're happy for you, and we're glad that we get to talk to you today. So let's dive into our first couple questions because we'd like to get those moving, and we want to get to good content. So you got all this. You've got, impressive resume. I was out on LinkedIn looking at all the places you've been and all the things you've done. It's quite a good resume. But how did you get involved with starting to use images and videos, and what did that look like for you originally?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people probably say this, but I definitely prefer seeing a visual of something more than just being told about it. I think we all relate that way. So I've been using it throughout my life as much as possible. I'm actually I'm an amateur caricaturist.
All right.
And I dabble and doodle in that, and it's fun. It helps me to when I'm visually drawing someone's face to really catch the essence of what makes them different. Anyway, so I love visuals, but video has captured my imagination since as early as I can remember, but I especially remember Indiana Jones and the trilogy growing up and loving the adventure that it was able to take me in as I watched and participated by watching.
Yeah, well, 2 things here. One, I love that you're a character, however we say it, right? I love that I don't want to see mine because I don't want to know what defines me. But I love that you're thinking visually, and then you're right. I love this idea that story video it can transport you to someplace different. I remember being in the theaters, Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, and just being a kid, being like, oh my gosh, here I am in this story, which is pretty crazy. So next question for you, Treion. How do you define success for learning content? And I know this is a big question, but what's it kind of at the essence of success look like for learning?
That has been the question, I guess you can call it the $1 million question that's been asked for as long as we can remember in the space. Because the term return on investment, or ROI, has been battered around for a long time. And so what I do with all the clients and companies I work with is I ensure that every piece of learning content that we create is attached to some form of success metrics. And that depends on what it is you are creating and who you're creating it for, what you want them to do. But it's important to understand not only just the learning objectives, which is more uh, sterile, I guess, when it relates to what you want the learner to come out of it, but you also need to go deeper and attach what it is you want to, the success you want to measure coming out of this experience. So ask, why are you doing it? So it's important that you get your learners from A to B. I call it the space between. What you do in the space between is the key. And but then what is B? And can you measure that it is successful or not? That's the key.
Yeah, so I love that. So you've got your learner objectives, and then you've got the thing that the company wants to know. Did you improve productivity? Did you reduce waste, or whatever the outcome is, right? And can you get to that? And I think that's probably the harder thing. People listening to this or watching this might be saying, well, that's a real challenge here, right? How do we get to that point? And we'll maybe come back to that question in just a minute. So as we wrap up kind of section 1 here, what is one tip that you could give the audience to improve using either images or videos in their work? So thinking from a learning perspective, you're doing this a little bit. What would you recommend?
Well, I definitely have a suggestion or tip for both. So I would, when you use images, use the image. In one of the books I wrote, there's a principle called shut down the ugly. And that's in the webinar manifesto. But the point I make there is, why do we always rely on a PowerPoint way of thinking when we throw up a little thumbnail of an image and then we write in bullet points what that image is trying to convey in our minds, right? Mm-hmm. So what's the purpose of that? I'd get rid of all the bullets and all the copy, if whenever possible, and just flood that entire slide. If you're using PowerPoint, use that entire slide just for the image. Because remember, the human brain is an amazing thing. It can connect the dots without us having to be that prescriptive in connecting the dots. And also, if we're verbally saying something, why do we have to have it up on the slide? So that's a visual tip. A video tip is keep it short for the same reason I just mentioned. People nowadays, our attention spans are shorter. We like short, we like micro. And you know what? We don't want to listen to, especially a talking head, for a long period of time, unless that person is super engaging, and even then, lean on the shorter side of things.
All right, so we got our marching orders. We got to fly through these things because we want to keep it short. But I love that what you said. I'm a fan of big image on the PowerPoint. Make that the focus. Maybe a word or two to give reference. I know you probably have the same experience. People ask you for your PowerPoint presentations all the time. People ask me for mine, and I'm like, just so you know, unless you look at the notes section, it's not going to do you any good. And hopefully I've written notes, because sometimes I don't. All right. Well, Treion, thank you so much for those answers. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a second. Hey everybody, thanks for allowing the quick interruption. Just want to let you know about 2 things. 1, we'd love to have you subscribe, like, and comment here on the Visual Lounge, whether you're watching on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. 2, go check out the TechSmith Academy. TechSmith Academy has a ton of great free resources about making videos, about using images, things that will help you get through some of those basics. Share it with a coworker if you're trying to teach them about some of the things about video. We'd love to have you let us know how that goes. There's surveys in most of the courses as well, but we'd love to hear from you. You can always email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. So send us a message. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. What would you like to see on the show? We'd be happy to hear from you. So with that said, let's get back to the show. All right, welcome back. Treion Muller is here with me. Treion, let's talk about Chief Learning Architect. That's been a role that you've had. What does that even mean? That was so fascinating to me, because we hear a lot about C-suites, right? Chief operating officer, chief executive. What's a learning architect do?
That's a great question. Like with many titles, I think the title might confuse what it is, but think of solutions architecting. Think of people that are problem solvers. And so that's what I do in this learning space. I lead with first really getting to understand what a client, the person I'm working with, what is their learning and development challenges, the obstacles, the limited resources and the opportunities they have, I really dig deep. I call that excavation. I spend a lot of time excavating what is it that they are struggling with. Where are they now? And then I try to understand where they want to be. That's again between A and B. It's the space between. And then what I do as a chief, learning architect is I help them architect the right bridge between A and B for their unique company, their unique culture, their unique learners and employees. And when you're architecting in this space, you have so much to work with, especially with technology nowadays and videos and images. It really allows you to decide, okay, how do we get them from A to B? And again, B needs to be attached to success metrics. And what are the options we have to build in between? So it's really simply you become a bridge builder as a chief learning architect.
Okay, so I'm guessing a lot of that plays into like an overarching strategy for learning within an organization, right? Like
Correct.
you're looking at, you have to look at tools because tools, they matter, right? Like what can we actually do? What can we build? Do we have a hammer when we need a hammer? But let's talk strategy for a second because I think for a lot of the people who might be listening to the show, or even myself, I start thinking about strategy and it's like, oh man, in grad school, because I have a master's like you, instructional systems technology, very similar kind of program. They taught us a lot about like designing like the modules, the thing. But what we didn't talk about that is that much bigger holistic strategy as much. And so I'm curious for you, what is learning strategy look like? What are kind of the, what are the considerations you might have for something like that?
That's a great question. And as a chief learning architect or chief strategy architect, and I've had both roles, it's aligned, right? When you architecting something for someone, you are building it with a roadmap in mind, with a strategy in mind. Think about strategy as purely where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and how do you know when you get there that you were successful, and also over how long of a period of time. I'm a big believer in getting small wins quickly
Mm-hmm.
and then building a phased approach when it comes to architecting learning experiences, and that is strategy. It's deciding what are the low hanging fruit, how can we get some, often it's revenue wins, revenue, achieve our revenue goals with some things right up front, and then we can start building upon those successes with more successes over time in a phased approach. So again, everything I've said so far is related to strategy, which is it's just wishful thinking and it's just building training events unless you attach success metrics. And those things and those success metrics have to be aligned with what the company is trying to accomplish, and the goals that the company has, or your decision makers, or your stakeholders. You have to align what it is you are doing on the learning side, learning architecture. Remember, this is about development. This is in the scenes of the day. I'm an anti-training person. I don't believe in the term training. I don't like the word training. It carries baggage with it. I think we need to think differently and call it learning experiences. But strategy is basically the vision part of it. How you execute it is the phased approach, and that's where you get into the details.
Okay, so I really like this, right? Because I like what you said. You're looking at kind of all the different things. You're looking at which are the appropriate things to do now in terms of wins, so you can get to that kind of that. If you're looking at the A B, where's the first pylon going to go down for your bridge, or whatever type of bridge you're building. So when you look at organizations, because I think this is the thing I hear a lot, is that organizations struggle, particularly learning and development departments, training departments, whatever their name is, they struggle with this idea of getting from that to that B with success metrics, because what are some of the easy ones that they can look for to say like, yep, this is what we should be tying to? Or is that all just like it might just be super, it depends, because every organization is different. What data I have access to right now might be different at the time to invest in it, et cetera, et cetera. So any suggestions for people struggling to get to that B, those success metrics?
So I love the question, and here's why. It brings out a blind spot we have in businesses, in business leadership, in the C-suite. And there's two blind spots. First of all, it's from the C-suite, which is, we have a chief human resource officer or chief learning officer. We have someone overtraining. Okay, good. They need to go just check boxes for us, compliance boxes. Oh, we need sales training. They can buy some or they can build it. And it becomes this very separate entity to the success of a company. So that's a blind spot that C suite leaders need to overcome, because what they don't realize is if you don't build effective learning and development experiences, you're going to lose your people. So there's a metric, a business impactful metric, retention, especially nowadays in this world of how many people are leaving their jobs looking for different opportunities. So that's a very real one. Another one to consider is culture. And leaders are always talking about we need to improve our culture, we need to impact culture. But think about it. The very, very first experience your new employee has with your company is the onboarding experience. And who's in charge of that? Your training and development, your learning and development groups, your HR. And if you don't empower those people to create great experiences, if you just have them check boxes and say, yes, make sure everyone goes through onboarding, and you give them a manual and they're done and they're out the door doing their job, well, you've just adversely impacted your culture. And because of that, your revenue, your profits. Okay. So that's a blind spot, that C-suite, that I try to educate. When I work with clients, I try to work with as many of the C-suite as possible to help them understand that learning and development is not a check the box, something you do separately. It is a continuous process that you need to provide for your learners, that needs to be, again, strategically architected to help them improve and grow over time. The second blind spot, it comes from those in the roles of overtraining and learning and development, because what they fall into this thing of saying, oh, yeah, we don't have influence on the business metrics. And so that is incorrect in so many ways. If you can impact the business results with what you are creating with your learning and development, you now become relevant at the C-suite. So start thinking differently. Start thinking and get to know what the C-suite is trying to measure. Learn how to impact those results with your circle of influence, which is huge because you deal with people and their development. So I'm very passionate about this. It's funny how we've fallen into this very weird place in the corporate America, in the world for that matter, where human resources is literally seen as resources and not as a benefit to the organization and its culture and business results. That is an incorrect assumption.
Yeah, well, I love this because I love that you're putting the spin on it, where so often we're just trying to measure kind of like widgets, right? Where you're saying like, hey, these individuals have this real value, and the onboarding example I think is very pertinent, because you come through that first experience, right? You're gonna shape your whole view of the world that you're now entering into based on a lot of that experience, right? Because they're going to tell you, this is how we are, this is who we are, and if those things don't measure up, it's like, well, do I believe this? Do I trust this? Do I want to be here long term? And so I think there's lots of great takeaways there. I will say that, one area I see that this is a slightly different is the world. We talk a lot about customer education on the show, where businesses are focused on educating their customers. And I do see a lot more of that kind of thinking. I feel like it needs to now be pulled back over to our HR departments, to our learning, training, development, the people that do onboarding or compliance training or these other things to help them, their employees be safe, to be productive, to be valuable, resources, assets, people. How about that? Valuable people.
And that actually brings up another point. I love that you mentioned that, because it's funny how in the actual learning and development space, there's been innovation, but it's been slower than in other areas. So I often look outside, not often, I always look outside of the L&D space for where innovation is happening, especially around consumer behavior, consumer actions. And you just mentioned one where people realize, because it's a design thinking principle, they realize if you have something that's client facing, yeah, you're gonna build it differently, because you think in your brain it has to look better because it's competing with all the other noise that's coming at them. But guess what? That same individual, I call a mutant learner, that you are trying to appeal to, is the same individual that's working for you, which is also a mutant learner, someone who also has a lot of noise and other things vying for their attention. So just adopt the same mindset of the same human-centered design thinking that you have with client-facing products, whether it's ed tech or whatever it is. Apply that same thinking to your employees, because that's the same people.
Yeah, I love that. And they are the, same people. They're just in different seats at the time, right? I'm learning a tool. I'm learning something else. Well, let me ask you this. So we move from, let's shift a little bit from strategy to, starting to make some decisions about the modalities, right? How am I going to do these things? We know what B looks like. We've got our success metrics. What are some of the criteria you might be using to help you determine like modality of a piece of learning? Whether you're deciding to use video or images or interactive modules, what are some of the considerations that go through your head?
So I created a tool called the ARC, or the Instructional Design Architecture tool, and this is what you can provide it to your listeners. I can give it to you as an interactive PDF. It helps you to it becomes a framework for instructional designers, especially as you are building a new learning experience. Okay. And so first of all, what I think is important to understand is we in this learning and development space have to be minimalists. We have to recognize who our learners are. These are busy people. We've spoken about this already. Lots going on in their lives. The last thing they want, really, in most cases, is to also have to do, and I'm putting in quotations, training, especially if it's the boring old crap that they are familiar with, right? That's why I like images and I like videos. But here's the key. I believe that you take the content you have to work with, you break it down into its smallest standalone bite sizes. This is a process I use on the ARC and that I suggest people do. So you might have it in a certain format with certain chapters and certain breakdowns now. But I'd suggest leaving that aside for the minute and saying, okay, if I were to break down my content into its smallest, again, standalone bite sizes, so these are usually principles that can stand by themselves. You need to create the connective tissue, but that's later. Then break it down. And then what you do is you say, okay, for this piece of content, this principle I'm talking about, what is the best modality to get this principle into the heads and hearts and activities of the learner? Now, when you do that, you're not leading with a solution, you're leading with a problem. Because often what we'll do is we'll say, oh, we're going to build this new sales training and we're going to use an authoring tool like Lectora or Captivate, Articulate, whichever authoring tool you're thinking. So what you've immediately done is you've limited the learning experience to what the authoring tool can provide your learner. Now, some authoring tools are pretty robust. And that, my friend, is unfortunately one of the only ways instructional designers work today is they default. And that's one of the principles of my book is don't default. Don't click the default setting. They default to what they know and have been comfortable with. And that's often working in an authoring tool and creating a long form. And even if it's micro, it's still limiting your thinking to an authoring tool. That's just one modality option you have. The choice might be simply to do a 2-minute video. That's it. Or it might be an infographic. Maybe an infographic for that one principle, maybe it's an interactive one, is the solution that's best suited for your learners. But if you force fit everything into, I'm using authoring tool as one example, but it's for anything.
Right.
If you LinkedIn, for example, and you're forcing everyone to do video first, right? And that might not be the right solution because video is not always the right solution. No offense to you guys, but
no, we're good with that. We understand that principle. We also like images. I'm kidding. We no, it's a really good point, right? Like you can't just say it's always going to be this because what if the thing you're trying to do doesn't need that? What if that's too much? What if it's too little?
Exactly. So that's why you approach everything. You think minimalist. You think what's the least I can do to get this message across in the quickest way? And then it also becomes less expensive, by the way, with that thinking. But what you end up with, by the way, is a very interactive and diverse experience that is more conducive for the mutant learner. That's something that they do enjoy because it meets them. You've spent the brain power to find the right modality for the principle that they are trying to learn, and you've done it in the quickest way. So you've done the hard work. They just consume it that way, and they thank you for it.
Yeah. Well, I love that, right? So, and I think it makes a lot of sense. You always go to the kind of what's the smallest thing that you can do. So I want to shift gears here because we've talked a little bit about video. I know you mentioned you like video. We maybe have just said not everything can be a video, which is true. But I'm curious, because this is a show about images and video. You knew we were going to talk about it. So I'm curious, in your mind, what is that role that video should be playing? And I know there's lots of other modalities that people can talk about. And we don't want to rule those out, but we're a show about videos and images, so let's talk about them. When is it you're like, yes, video makes the most sense? Because I still get this question a lot. They're like, well, when should I do a video? And for you, Treion, what are you thinking? Like, what's your kind of gauge whether a video is the right tool or not?
Yeah, it really does depend when you use video and which way. I wrote I created an infographic actually that identified 10 different fun ways that you can use videos. And it includes everything from a talking head to an interview style to using animation to throwing in graphics over audio. There's so many different options of things that you can use. But again, like with authoring environments, you want to be careful that you don't force fit anything. And so I'd always ask the question, instead of leading with the question, how do we use video? I'd say with this content, what's the best way to get what we're trying to accomplish with this principle to my learner? And if it is video, in what form does it look? Are we asking an expert? Is it going to be a role play where we show a bad example and a good example in a video? Is it going to be some kind of a branching video? It depends. But here's some things to keep in mind about video that I love. 4 reasons that I believe video has truly become what I call the king of this learning space. First, it's deep rooted, right? It's an integral part to our everyday lives. We use video. We're using it now. Mm-hmm. We're recording this podcast or video cast in video. Facebook is TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. We drop in images and videos all the time. But YouTube has changed how we think. YouTube is such an underrated, and sometimes we don't give enough credit to how YouTube has changed how we think about video, including accepting videos that aren't necessarily Hollywood quality videos. It's authentic, right? And then you get things like The Office, right? We know it's not reality TV, but they made it look like in some ways there was reality TV. It wasn't your high production Hollywood show that with action sequences and stuff. So it's deep rooted. How we think of video, it's part of our lives. Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, you name it. Prime Video. We just use video and we participate more in video than we ever thought we would. So that's deep rooted. 2, we vested in it. It empowers and rewards our participation. Think about this. So we all are consumers, number 1, and we also producers of video. Sometimes it's just very basic video of my granddaughter crawling on the carpet, right? That's me producing. But I also like consuming videos and with laughing at shorts or watching long form. The third thing is they're simple. It's simple, it's easy, and it's fairly inexpensive for anyone to engage in, right? We all have video capacity on our phones. And so we can become our own directors. So it's simple to use, to publish, to even edit nowadays with the authoring environments we have. And lastly, it's memorable. We've known the principles, the research behind this, but images and video make things much more memorable than just writing on a page. And it's just, these are the 4 components and reasons I think that video especially is king in this learning space.
Yeah, I love all those examples, right? And I was, as you were talking about it, I was thinking, yeah, okay, the barriers to entry for video are just so low. It used to be, it was really a big deal. I remember, gosh, getting a video editor on your your work machine or computer. Not only was it expensive, it was slow and hard to use and difficult. And then, then getting a camera, let alone getting the footage off the camera, it was like a 5-step process, right? So just all these barriers have been eliminated. And then, I love what you're saying about it's memorable. We think a lot with visuals. We are drawn to watching things move or drawn to watching things that are visual in nature. So really great stuff. So let me ask you this. Let's work maybe a little scenario here for a second. So let's say I'm coming to you and you're consulting me. I promise I'm not asking for free consulting here, and my team is struggling. They're like, oh, we've got this problem and we're trying to decide between modality A and video, are there questions that you would ask? Like, because you've laid out a lot of really good reasons of why video, but what are the questions you ask? Maybe your checklist of things to go through. Like, does this fit for a video? Are there things like that, or are you thinking you just gotta kind of suss it out, work through it, make sure it works?
Well, that's a very broad question. Because of the possibilities that are
Right.
and the variables involved in that. Again, what I would do is, instead of saying, let's look at ways why you should use video instead of another modality, I'd first need to understand what other modality. I need to understand what the principle or content was that we try and what the learning objective is for that principle. That would inform, again, it's going back to my ARC tool, that will inform whether what if it's video, what type of video, or if it's another modality. Again, I would always lean on the side of simplicity first. What's the simplest way to get this across in the most elegant way? Because simple sometimes looks like crap. So when I say simple, I don't mean crap. I mean it has to look good. Quality nowadays, people don't accept poor quality anymore, because they can go elsewhere and find better quality. So the nice thing about the authoring environments that you guys provide at TechSmith is, man, you can create anything from really just basics, boring stuff, or you can create some cool experiences very quickly and very simply.
Well, thank you for that, and that's what we try, right? Simple, yet you can also be elegant or more complicated, if you will, more professional, whatever the right term is. So yeah. I mean, just to kind of wrap around on and finish up on this question, I'll just offer the idea that I often look about, like, what is video good at, right? It's good at showing things. It's good at depicting movement. You get that duality of audio and video together. So that's what I know, regardless of what the other tools can do, that's kind of, does it make sense for those things? So, but I love your answer nonetheless. It was a great one. Now we're going to wrap up here in just a few minutes, but I want to, so we'll get to our speed round. I want to talk real quickly, because you had another framework, and I just want to hit on this framework because, I started looking at it, and if you could walk us through the C.A.R.E.S framework, and so when is that beneficial, and what, I guess we should say, what is it, and when might it be beneficial to help me in my kind of this learning creation journey?
Yeah. So I've been working, like I said, I think before, for 20 years in the L&D space. But for the last 15 years in that space, I've been testing and researching how to create effective learning experiences and how to know if it's effective. So luckily, I'm coming out with a book again in January, and it's called The Rise of the Mutant Learner, like you said in the introduction. But in that, I introduced this C.A.R.E.S learning effectiveness framework. So there's two main use cases for the C.A.R.E.S framework. The first, and by the way, this is for both for instructional designers mostly, and for those who lead instructional designers and are over learning and development experiences. Okay. So the two use cases for the C.A.R.E.S learning effectiveness framework is, one is to evaluate any current learning experience you have, whether it's a course, a module, a program, is to evaluate it for the likelihood of that experience, achieving the change, the desired change that you wish, that you want out of that experience. So it becomes an evaluation tool, and I have it's called the C.A.R.E.S efficacy assessment that helps in 15 questions, gives you a score, gives you in 5 minutes. It doesn't take long, but you want to do it for the smallest modules if possible, because it gives you more value that way. The second use case is if you are an instructional designer charged with building a new learning experience, you can use the C.A.R.E.S framework to increase the likelihood of that learning experience getting the behavior or the other changes that you desire. And the way I suggest people do that is using the ARC tool as an instructional design, almost like a storyboard, but it's a framework that you use. And C.A.R.E.S is there, the success metrics, as well as different modalities, including video. So those are the two use cases: to evaluate existing and to create new learning experiences.
Okay. So I'm assuming it's all going to be in your new book. So everyone's going to have to go check out in January your new book. I did find that in some other places. So if they search for your name, they can find some more information about it. But it sounds like I was really excited about looking at it, because it's like, okay, this looks like it's got some really great ideas behind it, ways that you could start helping to kind of level up what you're doing as you think about your content.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Treion, this has been awesome. We're gonna go. We got a couple more questions, but they're in our speed round. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Okay, for those who might be new to the show, speed round questions are meant to be fast answers, so not one word answers, but short answers. And what we're gonna do is we've got 12 questions that potentially ask from. You got blue or green? Do you have a dice preference?
No, but this goes blue, sure.
All right, it's good. It's got gold flecks in it. So, let's go here. So we're going to bring up our dice tower. I'm going to roll the die and we're going to ask our first question. Here we go. And it always happens off the table. It's like, it doesn't count. Oh my gosh, we're going to go green. It doesn't want to stay. There we go. All right, so that is, you can tell it's a 9 because the line is underneath it. Hopefully that will focus. So, here we go. Question number 9. Is there a question you wish I would have asked? So, something that you wish I would have asked that we could have talked about today.
No, there isn't. So I'm not helping. I'm trying to think of something, but I've been pretty thorough. So you might have to cut this out.
No. That's good. I mean, that means hopefully we've done a good job at asking the relevant questions. The real trick is what people put in the comments, like, why didn't you ask him about this? So we'll see. Okay, so next die roll here. 11. Okay, I should have shown that on screen, but guess what? It is an 11. I won't prove it. It's nothing needed here. Okay, this one is also related to your stuff. What is one resource that you think everyone should know about? It could be your resources. It could be any resource, something that might help us beyond what we talked about today.
Well, I'm a believer in creating productivity processes that make your life easier. And so David Allen, the best-selling author of Getting Things Done, I was sitting at his kitchen table in Amsterdam, and I was doing some work with him and his wife around getting things done and improving the product. And I asked him, because one of his principles is to capture. How do you capture all the information coming at you? And he introduced me to an app called Brain Toss. That's Brain, TOSS. And I love it. It allows you to capture notes, video, audio, and then have it sent to however you organize with. For me, it's my email. And that's how I keep my life organized. So that is one way that I improve the ease of my life, capturing things in Brain Toss.
All right. Well, I love that. And I did see that work that you were doing with David Allen. I was like, okay, is that all right? That's pretty legit. So yeah, you got some great experience from your past life here. Awesome. I'll have to check out Brain Toss. I don't know if I can organize my life via email, but I'll figure something. I'm still figuring it out.
Might be another way.
Let's hope. Okay, let's one more question here. That is a 10 on the die, so that's good. Okay. So very broad, what's next for you? Anything coming up besides the book, or in addition to the book, I should say?
Well, again, working on something for 15 years on and off, right? It's a huge endeavor. I'm very excited for it to share my learning, my failures. Just sometimes things come over time, and I'm really excited to share that with the world and see where that takes us. I'm tapping into some of these great researchers that some of you have heard of, like Bloom and Kirkpatrick and David Merrill, and some of their ways that they use to evaluate the efficacy or performance of different training or learning experiences. So I'm excited to add value to that discussion. So that's my quick answer. Hopefully that helps.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Treion, we're going to do our final take in just a second. Before we do that, where could people connect with you, find more information? Where are they going to be able to find your book?
Okay. So LinkedIn is the best. I'm going to give you one thing. I do have a website. It's all available and accessible on LinkedIn. That's also where I'm keeping tabs on the book, and I'm still trying to figure out if I want to publish with a publisher or self-publish. The book is pretty much done. It's just now a matter of what do I want to do for distribution, and so I will keep people informed on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So go connect or go follow Treion as we do that. So Treion, the last thing we like to do is just ask kind of final take. It's a 30-second summary of all the things that we've talked about here, your best wisdom. So with that said, what's your final take?
The final take for me, my summary on what we discussed is, images and videos are great. Keep them short, keep them elegant, make sure that you don't force it though. Be a minimalist as you approach not just video and images, but also other modalities for learning and development. And when you do that, you keep your mutant learner in mind and they will appreciate you for it.
Awesome. That's a great final take. Treion, thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate all your great wisdom and expertise and look forward to seeing the book hopefully in January.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. We're always happy to have you. If you like what you're hearing, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know how we're doing so we can get better. Go look at Treion stuff. It's really good and really useful stuff. Hopefully you got a lot out of our conversation. With that said, we'd like to end the show the same way every single time because we hope that you do this. It's wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we hope you take a little bit of time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.